everyone. Today we're going to be planting a indeterminate tomato in this pot. We have a tomato here called a Blue Beauty that's going to end up in this pot at the end of this video. So we're going to fill this pot with 3/4 of the way with soil. Okay, that's about right. This is a fairly large pot, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time really making sure that the soil has been fully moistened. We're continuing to moisten this soil, let it get fully saturated. I'm going to eyeball where this would sit in the pot. So one of the things I'd like to do today, because this is an indeterminate tomato, is I'm going to prune a couple of the leaf sets off and deep bury the tomato because it has an adventitious root system, so we will get roots growing out of these. So I'm going to be planting it to about here in this pot. Before I get to trimming off these lower leaves and putting the plant in the pot, we're going to condition this pot so it's ready to go. In order to do that, we're going to use a recipe from Love Apple Farms. Cynthia Sandberg has come up with her recipe, which is called the tomato bomb. We have the tomato bomb all mixed and ready to go, and this is the correct amount for a single tomato going into this pot. With a recipe that consists of a 1/2 cup of fish meal, a 1/2 cup of bone meal, a 1/2 cup of a granular organic fertilizer, a cup of worm castings, 2 aspirin, 2 tablespoons of crushed eggshell, and then once we've got that in the pot, we are going to apply some mycorrhizae inoculant to the roots. Why we are adding eggshells to our tomato bomb recipe is to provide some available calcium, which will prevent blossom end rot, which is something that you see on the bottom of the tomato. It's quite unsightly. It turns into a dark, leathery spot, and the tomato is rendered inedible. So we certainly don't want that to happen. So that's why we're putting the eggshells in. One of the things I wanted to take a moment to discuss is the nature of this indeterminate tomato. One of its aspects is that it has adventitious roots. And that means that if I were to prune off some of the lower leaves and bury those nodules below the surface of the soil, roots will actually grow out. So not all plants have this adaptability, but the tomato does. So I'm going to go ahead and prep this with our tomato bomb, and then we will work on removing the lower leaves. So I'm spreading this. In the hole, and I'm kind of eyeballing how deep I want to bury this, and I think I can go ahead and take 3 leaf sets off. So I'm going to take this, this, and this off, and we'll be burying that below the surface of the soil. Use my pruners. And I'm going to try and get a very nice clean cut right next to the stem. Can see that. You see I haven't left a lot hanging, going pretty close to the stem. And there we go. And then we'll do this one so you can see it from the side view. There we go. I'm going to add a little more soil to the top, and then I'm going to add some mycos to the roots, and then we're going to go ahead and plant this tomato. So it's not a lot, just a little bit, so that there is a little bit of a soil barrier between all that fertilizer and the tomato plant. Give it a little squeeze. Looking at the bottom, I'm not seeing roots coming out, so this should come out very easily. got some lovely roots here. You can see them all around the side there. Sometimes what I like to do is just get them a little bit wet. Just very, ever so slightly. I find that the mycos, which is the mycorrhizae inoculant, really adheres rather nicely to the roots. You have to make contact with the roots. If you just throw it in the hole, you're not going to get the desired result. So as I sprinkle it around, and then I just kind of in, and then I rotate, add a little more water. Whoops. There we go. Getting it right on the roots, and you can apply it fairly liberally. And I can see that it's really touching the roots. I like that. And I usually do the bottom last. Now, these roots already got a little bit of water on them, and I'm really making sure that they're saturated. And then I'm just gonna get maybe just a pinch more. Get that right on the bottom. Okay. Now I want this last leaf set that I took off to be below here. So a couple things you can do is, if you feel like you need to make the hole a little bit deeper, you can. The other thing you can do is you can gently spread those roots apart, and that will decrease the length of the root ball, and you're spreading those roots out so that they're, you know, be growing away from the center of the pot. And now I'm going to use my hori-hori and just kind of eyeball it. That's where the top node is, and it's definitely lower than the top of the pot, so I think we're in pretty good shape. Might lower it just a hair more. Again, I'm taking care to spread those roots out, and I'm making sure that there's a nice firm surface that I'm resting that tomato ball on. Okay, now we're ready to fill in some more soil. Sometimes I make a big pile on one side, and then I just kind of spread it around. And we'll water this in quite liberally to make sure that all the soil has been moistened. Make sure that we're standing up straight. Go. Still got a ways to go. So we still got 2 more leaf nodes to cover up. So now this tomato is going to have quite a few more roots than it otherwise would if we had not removed those leaf sets. Tomatoes are one of those plants with adventitious roots that loves to be what we call buried deep. But not every plant has adventitious roots, so it's worth looking it up before you decide to deep plant just any old plant. Okay, so we have successfully covered the last root node, I'm going to water it in. I may find that my soil level decreases so much that I'm going to have to go ahead and come back and add a little more soil. And then we're going to go ahead and top it with some mulch. And we've got some very nice green hay that we are going to use as our mulch today. You can see my soil levels dropping just a little bit. Try to keep that hose moving so that we're really not leaving any dry pockets of soil. And I'm also kind of checking it to see that it's level on all sides. And that looks pretty good. Now when I add my mulch, I'm going to make sure that I'm not allowing it to touch the stem, the center stem of the plant. You want to keep it back 4 to 5 inches so that mulch doesn't heat up right by the stem, because that could cause problems. And I'm going to go ahead and water this in as well, because right now it's so dry that if I didn't do that, it would just kind of blow away, and then what's the point in even having it? But this will also help retain water so that it's available to the root system. And I do want a liberal amount. I'm just putting it in a little bit thin right now, but I'll add some more. And I'm trying to make sure that I'm moving it back a little bit. So here we have our planted tomato in a pot. We're just going to do a little last watering in of the mulch so it gets wet and holding it in place. Now in a couple of weeks you're going to want to get your tomato cage and put it over. Some people like to do stakes. Some people use tomato cages. But you will need that because this tomato is going to get very large and it's going to need support. And this is how you plant a tomato in a pot.